Hi everybody, and welcome to our complimentary webinar, which is brought to you today in partnership with Dialpad, Auscontact's national gold sponsor. Our session today is titled Secrets to a Successful AI Strategy. And I know that you're all going to walk away with some useful tips and a whole lot of information that's going to help you as you continue to embark on your own AI journey. In the spirit of reconciliation, Auscontact acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, waters, and community. We pay our respect to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all First Nations people joining us here today. Today's webinar will run for approximately 60 minutes, and during that time, with the help of today's special guest, Jaden Zulo, we hope to spark your interest and engage you in the conversation, as well as give you some key thinking and ideas that you can take back to your respective business. We'll, as always, round off the session with some Q&A at the end. I am Fran Southwood, CEO of Auscontact, and I will be your moderator for today. Remember to interact with us. It helps maximise the benefit that you take away. As you would know by now, there is no need to take notes. We will send you with details and a link to the recording of the webinar, as well as some of the information that Jaden is going to take us through today. I know you all know this by now, but I'm going to say it again. To interact with us, please use the QA button on the control panel or the chat feature. As you would know, if the questions or commentary that you're typing is relevant to the information that Jaden's taking us through, I'll jump in and ask those questions for you in real time. But if it's something that's more general in nature, I'll leave that until the end and we'll ask it in Q&A. If you're listening through a headset and you have any sort of issues, if you can just hit the raise hand button on the screen and someone from the team will jump in and help you. Or alternatively, in the registration email that you would have received, there would be all the dial-in numbers. So if you want to jump in that way, feel free. But again, I encourage all of you to get involved in the conversation. We have got a prize for the best questions. So this is always a bonus. The wonderful people at Dialpad are offering a $200 gift card. And it's a Prezi card, so you can choose a whole lot of different retailers that you can select as your gift card, but it will be best question as selected by Jaden. So make them tough and hard and challenging, or even just interesting and fun. But Jaden will make the decision on who is going to receive that card. You need to be on the webinar at the end to be eligible for that, but always a nice opportunity there. I'm going to stop talking. I am now going to introduce Jaden, who is the Manager Sales Engineering at Dialpad, and hand over to you, Jaden, to actually kick us off.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Fran. And yeah, sorry for the round in circles on the slides there. The webinar today, which is based on some research, I'll be guiding everyone through. And as Fran mentioned, ask your questions along the way. And the research paper that we will be referring to, we do have that available if you are interested in reading it yourself. So you'll be able to contact us. We can sort of send you through a link for that. So let's get into it. But first, for those of you who don't know, as Fran said, my name is Jaden. I work at a company called Dialpad, and Dialpad provides a software communications platform that connects your workers and your customers together so that you can do AI automation, make some sort of AI workflows, and then overall be able to connect over voice, video, omni-channel, and SMS, then also push that information through to your CRMs. But we'll cover that as we go along. So here is an outline of what our tool does, and keep this in mind for the content we're about to go through, because as we move through, the research that I'm referring to is called the Secrets to a Successful AI Strategy. And this was research that was done between December 2023 to January 2024. And it was a survey of over 1,000 senior executives who were in US, Canada, UK, Australia, and New Zealand. And what they did is they were asked a range of different questions around the AI adoption or project initiatives that they had within their business. So AI is something that has come up a lot this year. A lot of people say that this is now quite a revolution that's happening, a big digital transformation disruption. And so, what does that mean for businesses that have actually deployed it? And that's why this survey is a great read. It's not a long read. And what it will do is it'll give you a lot of things to think about if you are currently in the middle of an AI project, thinking about doing one soon, or maybe you looked at it and thought, oh, this has probably got a bunch of problems. This research will basically confirm or dispel any sort of concerns you may have. Now, you can see there that when the survey questions were asked, the revenue of the companies, the growth of the companies, the efficiency of the companies, costs related to the companies, their overall strategic differentiation, and then their brand presence were probed. So before we start off on what the research of those 1,000 executives sort of responded with, we want to know from you, where are you up to in your AI adoption or project initiative within your company? So we're just going to shoot off a poll, and if you want to just answer that, that can help us sort of frame well, who we're speaking to here, and then that way, when the questions come through, we'll know the context of it as well. So here's a poll. Oh, I get the poll too. Oh, okay.
We
Let's
all
see
get
what
it,
we
Jaden.
all
We
get it.
all get
I'm
it.
trying to think whether I should answer this or might skew the data. Let's have a look here. No, I think I should answer it actually. Uh,
Interesting. And I know I asked you this earlier, Jaden, the
yeah,
last question there around people that have previously used it but no longer in use. And I think when we first met, I was like, why would anyone roll it out and then stop using it? But you've seen that in some of the markets where people have used it, some of the underlying, elements that were really needed, some of that foundation work hadn't been done properly. So actually they've turned it off. They've decided it wasn't actually delivering what they needed. So for me, that just absolutely amplifies the need to get some of this basic stuff right.
oh, absolutely. I mean, and even in this survey, 10% basically were saying, no, I'm not doing this AI thing as well. So that's out of 1,000 people, that's 100 companies that did go down that path. And
Yeah.
then further to that as well, we sort of touch on where the Pandora's box, when you start an AI project, one of the main things that come up, and it's nothing to do with the tools themselves, it's to do with the company. So we'll get into that later. But yes, absolutely. That's why we want to ask that question there, because that does happen. 10%
Yeah.
apparently.
Well, we can see here that nobody online, nobody in our audience has actually used it and moved away. But
Yep,
not surprising to me is the vast majority are still researching the right tools, but not yet deployed.
correct.
Um, but yeah, interesting. Okay, we'll
This
stop
is a
sharing that
great
one.
mix. Yeah, that's a
Yeah, it
great
is.
mix. Looking forward to the questions then, because everyone's in research mode, which is probably why they're here at this webinar, which is
Or
great.
or living through it mode.
Exactly.
Very good.
So let's have a look here, just as, for people who sort of go to a research paper, if you've done it before, you tend to just go straight to the bottom and go to the takeaways or the conclusion. And these are essentially the stats that really stood out for Ah Wang, who was the researcher on the paper. And it was that 91%, the biggest concern is that they just don't have the data they need to have the AI decision making or answers be accurate. So as we'll get into, when you start these AI projects, and for the 50% of people on this webinar that are researching it, be ready. Be ready to basically run into not a dead end, but a really big hurdle because you don't have the right type of data. And that's what 91% of those surveyed ran into. Now, 77% believe that it's going to give them a competitive advantage. So if you look at what the first takeaway is compared to the second one, it's pretty good motivation. And we'll go into some more detail around that as well, around what that competitive advantages is. 75% expect AI to impact their roles in less than 3 years. We'll get into that, but essentially probably some people here may be thinking, oh, is that a negative thing? Does that mean it's going to replace staff? The good news is that that is because when you open up these projects, it's sort of like turning a light on in a dark room. You start to see the potential combined with that competitive advantage. So that impact is actually more from a positive perspective. Now, 69% of the CXOs plan to lead the AI efforts. And Fran, I think you had some commentary on this as well. So when we think of a CXO and computers, what do we sort of think around that?
Well, I think it's interesting, and I know certainly we've seen a lot of new positions start emerging in the Australian market. You know, chief AI officers, and really this transition between where some of the decision making around customer and full customer strategy, so interactions regardless of contact center, where that actually sits, and we're seeing a lot of almost a joint accountability and responsibility, not necessarily from a CXO perspective, but in the past, we might have historically seen um, people making all of the decisions about contact center and the technology and the tools being used in the IT area within an
Correct.
organization. We're definitely seeing a shift that says actually the strategic value that comes from the understanding of customer is not necessarily in the IT space. It's a broader role. We're seeing the emergence or the connection of chief customer officers actually having responsibility for contact centers and customer interactions more broadly. So I think whilst some we've seen some real change in the market, probably the interesting part is that we might have a chief operating officer or whatever sort of call out that they're going to lead it. What they actually need, though, is the grunt and the understanding of what can it do, what will it do, what does it do,
Yep.
that they're not going to get from a traditional IT space as far as its impact within the environment on a customer. And for me, if I look at all of these key takeaway, if I thought of those as a theme, if I was in that research stage of actually building business case or trying to actually build momentum and generate support or appetite for this within my organization, I'd actually be taking some of these and building some components in my business case around them. So
Correct.
again, turn them as a contra and actually build their implication within your setting into what it is you're building as a business case.
So I've been doing this for almost 5 years now in terms of the Dialpad app, and it was only last month that I had my first meeting where we went to the customer site, and it was the IT person because they're normally ones that reach out about video and telephony sort of updates, and they said, oh, and this is our CAIO. And I was like, oh, a CAIO, okay. And then I was sort of the person sat down, and the questions they were asking were exactly to your point, Fran. They were asking questions around the overall strategic direction of the company, who want to essentially use machinery to take their company to the next level. And the question set that they were asking, the examples they were giving were very different to what an IT person's headspace and skill set was. So it was very, very good to sort of hear that fresh take on what this type of tool can do, and therefore its potential, so that that would then map into the cost benefit sort of ratio analysis as well that that company was making. So that definitely the CXO is doing it. Their strategic mind, their overseeing duties is definitely of benefit when it comes to a tool like this, because if you start looking at it from a narrow focus, you may not necessarily understand the value it can bring. So here, 54% are concerned about AI regulation. Everyone's probably seen in the news, there's a lot of government magnifying glass over social media. Some people are saying it's a little bit too late, but better late than never. And this is sort of a reflection, I think, this 54% stat. I think a lot of businesses know that the government takes a long time to catch up on things that should be regulated. And here it is here with 54% saying they're not really concerned about the regulation just yet, even though AI is very easy to access and is definitely on the rise in being available in so many different software tools. And
I think
38,
it's
yep,
challenging though, right? As you say, we certainly hear about it when it goes wrong. And if you think about the different verticals and the different existing regulatory requirements on many of our members, you think banking, you think superannuation, you think government. There are some existing regulatory components that they need to really think about before they embark on this. So I think that whilst there's a AI regulation itself, and yeah, we're trying to sort of, if you think about DTO as far as the digital agency in Australia and how it is trying to come in and say what is the frame, what is the expectation. I think it was government that said we need to have a chief AI officer in every organisation. Um, but that is the challenge. If it's continuously changing or it's not yet set, organisations are thinking, well, what's going to be that retrospective position that we now need to actually be ready for, but equally comply with? So, yeah, you can understand why there's that concern, given that sort of latent or latency with regulatory positions from a government perspective.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, it's going to be okay, we have all this set up. We sort of set everything up when it was the Wild West and it did us all good. And now we have to go and overhaul and refix
Mm,
everything. I think a lot of experienced sort of CXOs who have been through that, who had a
mm,
business set up a particular way and then were told by the government you can't do it that way anymore. They know the pain of unstitching or going back in and having to do sort of a fencing off of the barn all of a sudden. So yeah, that's definitely going to be playing in their mind as well. So not that they don't think it's going to come, they're just going to have it in
mm,
their mind. And then the final statistic there of 38% are concerned about AI in the workplace. This similar to the one above. Sort of may not necessarily understand what that means, and that's because this is the key takeaway slide. So we'll be able to go into detail around why less than half are concerned about AI in the workplace and its effect on, the people's roles, their morale. And let's get into the sort of the weeds around this. Okay, so let's start at the top. Now, AI is a top priority, is what the research found. So all the respondents across all the industries, the geographies, and the roles named AI as a top business priority that was mandated by their board. So it wasn't that a new CXO had come in, a new CEO or a new COO and said, we're going to, or even a new CAIO and said, yep, we want to basically deploy AI. Their board had heard from research that they had done, or even the stuff that they had read from different consulting firms, and they said we need to have AI here. Then deployed it and said, go make this happen. So the ones of the thousand sort of surveyed, 69% had at least one tool already deployed. And as our poll sort of results showed, there are Australian businesses that also have more than one, but definitely one tool deployed. And well, here on the 50% is still researching, so they're close to having it as well. Now, what is key is where are those tools being used? So you can see there that the top five is analytics, automated repetitive tasks, content creation, forecasting, and customer insights. But if you look there on the chart on the right, there are other topics and other areas in the business where it came up. So they obviously had decision making, risk management, strategic planning, governance and compliance, and then staff training as well. But the highest ones being those five. Now, as I said, the board said make it happen. And as we were discussing before, new roles like the CAIO were put into effect. And essentially, the CXOs are doing the spearhead approach to this, with 69% of them saying that they're the ones that are going to sort of lead the research, the overseeing of the deployment, and then the gathering and the reviewing of the results, and then basically forming up whether the transformation has got the impact that they had predicted as well. Now, 42% of those CXOs are worried about the security and compliance of it. And that ties into what we were saying before around the accuracy of the data, the government regulation. And there are a couple more things that overall roll up into that security and compliance, which we'll get into that later. And 54% of their teams believe that their team is already familiar and receptive to AI adoption. So that's something that you'll also probably should think about, because remember, this is a webinar on an overall successful AI strategy for your business. And you need to consider, well, I'm going to lead this from the top, but where are my team? How does my team feel? And where is my team's sort of skill level with AI? Because AI is not, like one of those robots you put on the floor and then it just starts vacuuming everything. You do need to actually interact with it, or you should be interacting with it in a way that people are comfortable with and understand how to control and also check for errors as well. And we'll go into that in a little bit more detail after as well. Now, there's that
Jaden, I
stat.
think,
Yeah, go ahead.
sorry, I was just going to say, I guess the other challenge, but it's an important element that, you know, probably a lot of our audience would need to be thinking about is, every single person within your organization and in your sphere of control will have a different need within this, right? So again, I think that, I was talking to somebody last week who said, oh, we're going to, we're going to teach everybody about AI. And I'm like, what does that actually look like? There's maybe some overarching general information that you would be useful to pull together that talks about your application of AI. Because remember, AI is not just this one-dimensional thing. AI, half your people are using it and they don't even know it. Would probably be my call out. But it is about to me. This makes it makes me realize that each organization needs to have a view of the different personas within their environment, and they need to understand what is it that they need to know about what we're doing. Not about, I don't need every person to be able to, code and adopt, actually come up with AI solutions and applications and the rest of it. That's actually not what we're talking about around upskilling and anything like that. But they need to have a really strong understanding of what you guys are doing with it as an organization, what applications you're currently doing and planning. So again, it's a strong change management
Yes.
practice, which then can actually lead to, people, sort of stepping into it more deeply within specific areas in your organization. But across the board, there needs to be an understanding of what your organization is doing as far as adoption goes, and what
Mm.
does it look like. Because I think there is still this fear, and that last dot point there, 10% plan to avoid AI altogether.
That's right.
That's, to me, that's kind of a crazy statement, even. So the fact that there are 10% of this thousand that actually think that's even possible, it would be like saying, 10% of, people aren't going to use technology that is now just accepted, because today is as bad as any of this stuff's going to be. And the more we continue to grow and evolve, this is just part of our world now in different applications. So to me, that's a classic head in the sand kind of approach, because it might be that at a point in time they're not going to think about it, but I don't know, 10% saying they're going to avoid it altogether. That's much
I,
higher than I would have thought. Hey,
I think that so I guess I should probably put my cards on the table with this one. So I've actually never ever used ChatGPT, and I plan to avoid it altogether. Now, I when I went back to university to do my master's, everyone there was using it. People in my team, they use it. I know many businesses where they've created some great assets using it as well. But I'm part of that 10% that plan to avoid it altogether. Now, I'm not saying that I'm sitting out the front of sort of the government house saying shut down ChatGPT. For me, I just don't want to get used to that type of tool set. But that doesn't mean that I don't let my team use it. It's not that I don't know that some of the content coming to me has been generated by it. But at the same time, I know that I'm at a disadvantage
but you're
because
not, that's not saying all of AI, right? It's just that application you're not interested in. And that's okay. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, I think we talked about a funny story that I'd shared with a friend of mine who's a professor at university, and um, their challenge with people using ChatGPT. And in a recent, he heads up a program, and it's a law master's course. Um, and people were actually giving him citations for articles that he had supposedly written that just didn't exist. So the hallucination factor was absolutely insane, right? So they've got to rethink how they actually address that as an organization, as a whole. But again, ChatGPT is a great example of something a lot of people avoid, I would probably say, because we know the limitations that it's actually providing. I read articles and I can tell the ones that are ChatGPT created. They have a particular style, they have a particular vocab, utilization that you constantly see. Um, so yeah, I think avoiding something like that is actually still about an application as opposed to AI as a technology.
But you raised a really good point, which for the 75% expecting to impact their roles within the next sort of 3 years, that's because of this information here, which the research paper showed, and exactly to the point you raised, which is you can detect or you have an ability to sniff out when something might be ChatGPT generated. Why is that? It's because you know the original skill set, but you're also familiar with ChatGPT output as well. And that's because here you can see that AI is already sort of here. It's already been around, especially
Mm.
around sort of chatbots. There are voice bots and they're on the rise. So for those of you who don't know, a voice bot is, for example, Google Maps will call everyone in its database, not using humans, but using a voice bot. And the voice bot will essentially ask your business, are you open for Christmas? If not, let me know. Don't have to put it in on a DTMF. You can basically just say it because then it might ask you what time you open and you say, oh, 11 a.m. till 4 p.m. Now, trying to use your DTMF 0 to 9 keypad to type that in is just too difficult. So a voice bot's able to process that. So because clients and customers are already familiar with AI, they know it exists. As Fran's pointed out multiple times, it's here, it's been around. It's not something that's trying to sort of sneak its way in. It's not something that has just made a big splash. People are already familiar with it. That means that these CXOs and yourself, when you're looking to deploy this, you sort of already have a framework, and we'll go through some of the principles, but you can see here that the surveyed respondents, they basically were already confident to be able to give this answer. And they said the vendors who are designing AI, now that it's on the rise, they need to be transparent. They need to make sure their tool explains how it got to that answer. There needs to be the ability for the vendors to reverse something that's not working. So if there's a bug in the code, it can't just sort of be sort of set and forget, and then all the data goes out there and keeps skewing more data and misinformation keeps spreading. We need to be able to train them to using academic standards. So it's not just, oh, input all this data and then just figure it out. There needs to be actual logic to the training models. And then finally, all the tools that the vendors are making, you must be able to intervene the responses or adjust the responses or override the responses as a human as well. If it's completely sort of set and forget, then you have things like the robo-debt saga, where they had sort of all these people being called, and there were particular reasons why they couldn't pay back their social security sort of debt, but the machine just kept calling. Because there was human interaction was an intervention. There was no sort of two-way street there. So that sort of knowledge of it all means that we have the ability here to see the competitive advantage because people are familiar with it. It's not like you're trying to walk in with something new. You're like, okay, we've got a tool here. Everyone knows that we have to work alongside machines, just as Fran was confirming before. So where does it actually impact? And this slide is important for those taking notes during their research to really think about these advantages and if you need them in your business and what that can potentially lead for your business. So increasing the efficiencies, especially when used for repetitive and mundane tasks, reducing problem solving times when used to search your knowledge sources. So for instance, if you fed in all of your intranet data, or if you have customer tickets and you basically fed all of that in, and essentially the same way you use Google is the same way you can use AI to collate and suggest answers based on knowledge sources. Maintaining consistent and higher standards. So this is especially relevant to things like your security. So how do you go and check that everyone's machine is updated or that everyone has all of their batteries at a certain level on a phone? Maybe you have a company where you want to keep all the temperature at exactly 22 degrees in all of your buildings. You can use AI to essentially keep monitoring all that data very quickly and alert you straight away as soon as something falls below. But then what you can do, the next level, is see the surrounding events that lead to, say, battery drain or lead to someone not updating their computer. So you can predict and then therefore consistently have those higher standards because you're not getting notified after the fact. You're actually being warned before it occurs. That's a difference between what this technology can do. Now, the deeper customer insights, again, that pattern analysis, this is a really big thing that AI can do. So pattern analysis, where you may not have even known that before Christmas, no one buys anything from your business because they all go on holiday. Oh, I never knew that. I had to sort of get this AI platform, and now I know that. And that's the thing. It's supporting the teams during growth because, again, maybe the AI can do those repetitive tasks. Maybe it can predict when stock is about to go low. All those types of things will support you during growth. And then it can also be used to do sort of live training. If you say, look, if someone is raising their voice on a call, or if the lines are getting too long, then there's going to be these are the things you can do to counteract that. And all of these contribute to an overall reduction in costs and response times for businesses. Obviously, I don't think I need to sort of go into more detail around that. You would know how you would basically use the type of savings we're talking about in those 5 examples to save costs and reduce response times in your company.
I think the real, one of the real benefits we're seeing, and again, I think those 5 dot points, really give you a starting point for a lot of this.
Yeah,
In the past, like contact centers of anywhere, but service delivery as a function, we have more data than we know what to do with. And it takes a really particular strategic skill to be able to actually not just understand what it's telling you about the now, but actually be able to track it back to, not just root cause, but how aligned is it to organizational strategy and mission, and really thinking about the now what next, what are those so what kind of factors. What these continues to actually refine and sharpen is those components. So it lets you bring it together, identify those connections and the counterpoints to the data to help you really think about strategically where are those opportunity points, and really getting underneath some of that, the failure that your interactions are the result of, right? So the failure demand, and really get underneath that. So I think it helps us sharpen that strategic lens and really think longer term about, how do we actually change the now? More importantly, how do we redesign for future? So how do we start thinking differently when we put in product design for, something in 12 months versus 12 months ago? What do we learn from this? And I think there's such opportunity with where it can take us, as opposed to dealing just with what we're dealing with today. It sets an organization up so strategically for that future.
absolutely. And remember, that's what the point of this webinar is to sort of help people get this all frameworked up, which is why I was so happy to see that more than 50% are still in research phase.
Yeah.
But those who already have it deployed, they can still take some of the sort of
Mm.
advice from here to sort of go back to their tools and just sort of do some benchmarking. So here on the right-hand side, the question is when is AI being used? As we saw, the companies all being surveyed were using AI, and a lot of them were using AI for their telephony system. So this being Auscontact, I have no doubt that a lot of people here already have AI potentially in their phone system as well. So this could be AI taking their call notes or summaries, doing a transcription of their call, maybe logging the calls over to their CRM, or maybe the recordings backing them up to a cloud drive, maybe doing some real-time coaching on the calls. So that could be sort of pop-up cards, or maybe it's doing advice based on what's being said. Maybe there's just a sentiment analysis. So maybe one of the team leaders has a display which is telling them calls that are positive or negative. Could also be the post-call one. So there's a lot of conversational intelligence platforms that will allow people to see after the call for QA perspectives, which calls were bad, which calls were good. So here it's pretty much an even split. So the companies that were surveyed, 30%, sorry, 39%, 32%, 29%. They were all sort of all the different points of a call, but during the call was the sort of largest skew. So before a call is an interesting one, which is that if you are an agent and you're about to receive a call, what information are you getting to best set the call up really well as it's going? And then after a call, how much of that is done by AI so that you can move on to the next call as well. So that's what I wanted to sort of call out about the before and after, about doing more AI in that section so that it actually frees up that wrap up time as well, and also gets them ready to set the call up correctly at the beginning, as opposed to during the call when you're in the deep end because the customer's there. Maybe it's a negative call and things are going bad, and then you're basically scrambling, putting someone on mute and trying to play catch up during the call. I guess that's why most people get the AI tools for there. But if you think about it, if you clear the before and the after, then the during, you're already smooth sailing by then.
Is the during referring to some of those agent assist tools?
Yes, yeah,
It could be some of you know, the coaching in real time,
correct.
et cetera, et cetera. And with the after call, Jaden, sorry, is that also including? Is it also including applications that are outside of calls? So
But this
you
is this
talked
is
about your analytics before. Or is this
yeah.
specifically about interactions?
That the question that was asked of them is, where are you using the tools? So 29%, basically what this tells us is 29% of them have a tool that is helping their agents after a call.
Post call. Yep.
Yeah, which to your point, that which you're very good at making, which is then you're like, well, that means 71% don't have a tool. And I'm like, that's true. You got to reverse the statistics. So 71% of people haven't found a tool to help their agents after a call. So that's the way to interpret that stat. And I think there's a real need to do that. I mean, I go to a lot of customer sites, and when we speak to a lot of customers, and once that person, the agent, hangs up the call, they just look at their screen and they've just got stuff everywhere because they basically just finished whatever it was that they just had to sort of row through on that call. And I see what they do. They look at the queue and they look back at all the notes they have to make, all the systems they have to update, everything they have to go and basically clean up. So they just look back at the queue and they just take the next call, because sometimes they would rather just go and wade through a customer complaint rather than do some of that admin as well, the post-call admin. I mean, people might not have that. That's what I've seen.
Look,
So
I think there's definitely some of that happens, and even in some of the processes we all have in place, transaction categorizations and things like that just don't get completed. So we see the behaviours that actually reflect, kind of we'll just move on type thing. Yeah.
so here a really good quote from R. Wang, which is 73% expect AI to influence customers within the next few years. So really think about what we saw before around analytics, automating work, communication, and content creation being some of the AI tools. So that content creation and the customer insights, that's what these are referring to here. The CXOs have seen that the AI can basically, because it can do things en masse, then that will mean that it can basically start to skew and influence customers in a way that companies haven't been able to do before. So this is all linking back to that competitive advantage. It's why 75% know that within 3 years, the whole way they go about doing their roles is going to change because they're getting access to something so powerful. And what are some of the things you can power up your company with? Well, Dialpad actually has 4 really, really good sort of AI tools that come with its calling platform. The first one is that we use our Gen AI to actually summarize voice, video, and your chats so that you don't actually have to read through the long transcript or listen to the audio recording. It'll even peel out the action items of things that you should be doing based on what it detected on the call. We have an auto CSAT for 100% of the calls. And what that does is it basically goes, okay, what are the general things that make a good call? So a good outbound call and a good in call and inbound call. And then what it will do is it will put it against that benchmark so that if you're going to do QA, then you go, well, this one's a 3, which means it's not a really good call. It's not a really bad call. Maybe I go have a look at this as well, and linking that back to QA, even if you don't have time to go and score simple things like, did the agent greet the customer? Did they pause the recording? Did they give the call recording notification? Did they ask for the ticket number? You can get 100% of your calls auto-graded by the AI as well. So those two, the auto CSAT and the auto-graded scorecards, is really, really good to save time, increase efficiencies, and improve your standards and make things more consistent. Because you also have there on the right, on the bottom, a live step-by-step sequence task. So during the call, you can have the AI coach along next to you to make sure you're doing the steps correctly. So did you say that the call is being recorded? Did you ask for the ticket number? Did you check with them that they had money or credit in their account? You can have all those steps there so that it's just it's there on the call and it's ticking it off as you go along with a nice bright, sort of like a bright shooting star effect as well. So it's not just sort of subtly doing it in the corner. Your periphery vision will pick up whether you're doing the things. And the best part is it will actually capture what the answer is. So if you're supposed to ask a question like, are you available to receive the package at 10 a.m.? And then the person replies with no, then that will get captured against there on the call notes as well, that they weren't available, but they asked, but the answer was no. It's pretty cool.
Jaden, there's a few questions here. I'm going to chuck in
Yeah,
just
yeah,
a couple of them. Will asked earlier around how you compare the effectiveness of different AI tools, and I guess my initial response to that would be, well, it depends what you're looking for, but I'd love your view on how do you compare it. We were talking about ChatGPT, I think, when William put that up.
yeah,
And there's other tools that people use, not ChatGPT, that actually are quite different, but still, perform the same thing. So in that sort of concept, how do you compare the effectiveness of different AI tools? How do you compare, these guys probably hear from a lot of different vendors that do your chat summaries. How do you compare? How do you sort of look at, and what are those things to look at, or look for when you're doing the research and making decisions? So have you got an initial view? Because
yeah,
again,
yeah,
it's
of
how long's a
course.
piece of string, I
Like
guess.
we have it towards the end, but
Yeah.
we can sort of touch on it now. And it's a good question because sort of when you're starting with this, you sort of go, well, where do I start? You start at the beginning. Now,
Mm,
the thing is that and we touch on this later, but you have to basically write this up as a business case. And you've probably written a business case for all sorts of purchases within the company. But for AI, you do the same. So when you do a type of business case, you do your stakeholder analysis. So who are the people that are going to be affected by this, and what are some of the points around what they're going to want to see and what they're going to want to avoid? Then you have your costs and what you've got budgeted for this. So let's say you've budgeted $10,000. Okay, and then what rate of return do we want on that? We want 4x return on that. So how are we going to get $40,000 worth of value out of this? Well, let's go back to sort of that slide we saw before with the increasing efficiencies, being
mm,
able to reduce problem solving times and putting a monetary value against that. Then we see later on, some principles that you should have in mind with AI because you've got other concerns, which is the section we've got coming up. So you list your risk analysis and you do your risk table, rate the risks that are on there. Once you've got all of that done, then you get to the final part, which is, okay, overall, do we need a specialist to do all of this? Or is this something that can be disseminated out? And because we touch on this later, but what you don't want to do is hire a tiger team or a specialist sort of resource that manages your AI tool. And then all of a sudden that person gets sick, gets poached. Basically, they ask for more money and you can't afford it anymore, and then all of a sudden your tool sort of stops. So think about your AI tool like you would any type of tool. So if you run a farm and you've got a field and you need to harvest, so do you do it by hand with physical labor? Do you use a sort of a scythe and then go through and do it manually with some tools, or do you get a John Deere thresher tractor? And then it really comes down to what you can afford, what your team is capable of. It's so many different things involved.
yeah.
So when you think and you write it all down in that way, then you've got your list. And the vendors come in and they've got their fancy blue shirts on, which have the word Dialpad, and they've got a little virtual background with Dialpad, and then they've got slides with a little icon on it, and you go, yeah, that's fine. This is exactly what I need to know. Then you just tell them to tell you. That's my job and my team's job to give you those answers. And if you come prepared like that, you just flick out the RFP or you just shoot the email and go answer these questions for me. Then once they're
It is
answered,
that due diligence, isn't it? It really
absolutely.
is. Yeah.
Absolutely. Like any expensive tool you're going to buy for your company,
Mm,
you treat it the same way. That's the easiest way to go about this because then the responsibility is on the vendor to answer. Then you're already armed. You're familiar with what you want. So the questions you start asking become relevant. But doing exactly what you're doing now, which is coming to this webinar, doing the research, hearing about all these things, that's
mm,
also a really good thing to do because I'm sure you've already got some questions now you can ask the vendors or that you can look for on the vendors' websites or when you do a proof of concept that you can test around and click for.
mm. The other thing we certainly encourage people to do is speak to other customers as
Yes,
well.
yes,
Hear about their experience, learn about because quite often some of the products will be similar, very similar.
yes,
The reality is you're also purchasing a relationship, which sort of is as often important to your success. How connected and committed is a vendor to what your mission and vision is? And how do you see yourselves working together? Like, what is that relationship component? So, often speaking to other customers or vendors is a really, really useful tool
yes.
because they'll tell you what's and all for the most part. A
A great,
couple of
a,
other quick questions here.
yep.
How long on average does it take to train Dialpad's AI? So particularly when we're looking at this screen here, Jaden, with
Yep.
the specific solutions. We know we're seeing some that say, oh, it's 3 months, others say 6 months, some say 6 weeks. Where does Dialpad sit as far as and again, it might be a little bit of how long's a piece of string, but if from start to finish, how quickly could you get something up?
So ours are all pre-trained. So they're pre-trained with Australian data. So we have an opt-in and an opt-out for training. So all the Australian New Zealand customers that are opted in and all of the Australian New Zealand Dialpad staff, they've already opted in. So the speech to text is already attuned to a multitude of different Australian New Zealand regional dialects, we could say it, or accents. Then we also have, from a summary perspective, what sentiment is in Australia and New Zealand. For the action items, some of the twang, some of the way we phrase actions, such as, chuck us a quote. So the chuck us a quote means create a quote. Those types of things are already been trained into this system. Some of the nuances will be around the what we call the company dictionary. So if you have particular acronyms or particular way that you spell things, you can essentially interact with the company dictionary and submit it. That normally takes about 2 to 3 weeks for that to sort of start permeating its way through. And then things like the scorecards and the playbooks, all those types of things, you can, if you need to, have a human override to speed it up. Otherwise, we do every quarter a big solid update to these sort of accent recognitions as well. So every 3 months, there's a big update, which will take all of the new sort of standards and user feedback on how the speech to text is picking up the Australian New Zealand accent, but you always have the way to human intervene earlier if you need it done quicker, and those are instant. Yeah. Except for the company dictionary, that takes about 2 weeks. Any other
And
questions?
well, there's one there around some of the common pitfalls
Yes.
to avoid, but I know we're going to get into a little bit of that so we might park that one and ask it in a few slides when you're talking about those key
Okay.
things to sort of work with.
Wonderful.
So we'll get
Well,
to it.
wonderful. Well, let's take a break from all the sort of product pitch stuff and let's get back to the research. So let's look at the other side now. Let's look at the negatives or the concerns or the things that you should be aware of if you want to have a successful AI strategy. So these are, we call them concerns. We won't call them sort of negatives. Let's call them concerns. So less than half of those surveyed were actually concerned about the tool's reliability or confidence in the tool's ability to deliver correct results. So I guess to that question earlier as well, when you're doing your proof of concepts, when you're seeing what the tools are capable of, oftentimes you'll be impressed. You saw our slide previously, it had a lot of good answers there. That is because of the way that it's being configured. That is because of the way that it has access to particular data sets. So they know the tools are capable of doing it. And that's why when we get to sort of the next sections here, these are things that are not necessarily related to the tool. These are also surrounding as well. So half of them are concerned about data leakage. Now, that's because for good reasons. A lot of tech companies get into the news about data leakage. There are obviously laws around saying when there's been a data breach as well. So this is good that they're concerned, because if you're not concerned around data leakage, then that means everything's fixed. But I think a lot of CXOs are not silly enough to think that there won't be data leakage. So we're going through a big wave of cybercrime from pandemic onwards, just because it's now is much more lucrative for criminal organizations to do it. So they are concerned about that. And then when they said for their project that they deployed AI tools, what were the challenges that they had? Well, 22% had security concerns. So these security concerns are around PII, so making sure that people's information was basically concealed. They realized that some of the data going in, that the AI was able to sort of ingest and read everything, which meant that some information about internal staff or some internal notes or stuff that they had been holding on for customers, like their date of birth, their telephone number, and their sort of street address, the AI sort of pulled everything up all at once, which means that it made it very easy for things to be able to be scraped for fraud purposes as well. So those challenges come up when you're not masking PII correctly. And then there was also intellectual property concerns as well. So this came up a lot, where it's sort of like, okay, so the computer generated this, or okay, we gave all this information to you, the vendor, when you were designing this AI. Who actually owns this now? So that came up a lot as well, or 22%. Now, 18% had the source data accuracy concerns. So that is something that will almost certainly come up, but it's how you go about repairing that. And we'll dive deeper into what that is, because that's what I see a lot, is the source data accuracy concerns. And then 12% had cost concerns. And again, I mentioned before, you sort of got to go, okay, if this is costing us $10,000 and we want to get $40,000 return, if you map it correctly, you can see whether it's doing that. Okay. So that's why when I mentioned before, we will touch on some of those things. So I have already gone over sort of examples around that. Now, let's see what your concerns would be, whether with the tool you've got now or in the research that you've done. What are your sort of concerns for your AI tool adoption within your business?
And they're going to have to pick their biggest concern, aren't they? Because I think they can only pick one here.
Yes. Yes. I don't like doing, well, what did you call it yesterday, Fran? Percentage of a percentage. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, percentage of a percentage is sort of mulls it. It's just, let's just go choose one.
And for anyone that puts other, I'd love you to put it into the chat box. What's the other? There's top three really sort of playing out mostly there, Jaden.
Yeah. I mean, I would hope that cost benefit comes up a lot, to be honest. I was surprised that cost was only 12% on those surveyed. So cost versus benefit, data privacy and security, inconsistent and accurate results. Okay, so we've got that pretty much lined up with what the 1,000 people surveyed as well, which is interesting as well. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So just as ours surveyed, people have those same ones there. So again, government regulation. So it's interesting. We're surveying people here, and it's reflecting what the research found as well, which is good. That's always good. From a research perspective, that's a really good thing. Yes. So okay. So the final results were, oh yeah, but
Oh,
those three. That's all right. There we go. So 27% data privacy and security, 27% inconsistent or inaccurate results, and 23% cost versus benefit. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. That's very insightful. So this is my favorite slide out of all of them, which is that trust is double-edged. And this is something that's not necessarily relevant for your first deployment project. This is something for your overall AI sort of strategy for your business. And this comes back to that impacting your role within 3 years. And this is where that impact can be negative. And let me explain this in more detail. This is the one I'm most passionate about. So trust at 77%. So people trusting in AI, they want to deploy AI. As Fran has already explained, it's already there. People are happy to use it. We've got all these people on this call that are here because they're interested in it. But if you trust it and you find the results are accurate, it means that you can fall into a sense of complacency and people don't think to interrogate the data. Now, I mentioned before that I don't use ChatGPT, and I do a lot of reporting here for this company, like a lot. And in doing that reporting, again, I don't use AI to just ingest and suggest. I do it all manually. I do it all using mathematics and use it all. And guess what? I get it wrong so many times. I'm constantly having to go back and check where the calculation was wrong. Now, if you use AI, what will tend to happen is you'll go, oh, cool, it generated that content for me. I'm sure it's fine. I'm sure it's fine. I'm sure it's fine. Till you get to the point where you just stop questioning it. You must always, always, always make sure that you keep in mind that can be wrong. And it can be wrong for so many different reasons. So one of the reasons is that Gen AI relies on that statistical probability calculation. And the data being skewed or the data coming out with something incorrect, which Fran mentioned before, called hallucinations, that could be just simply because the connected data is wrong or it's irrelevant. So I'll give you an example of something that's irrelevant. One of our customers was using US customer purchase history for the AU market. Now, that might sound like it would be reasonable, but really when you drill into it, it's very, very different. The way that the US buys versus the way that AU customers buy, it is very, very different when you have extremely high volumes. So one of the things, if you're connecting a lot of data, you got to remember that in statistics, you have outliers. So that's all the ones and all the 99s. Now, if you have a large volume of data, they start to add up. And because they start to add up, it can really sort of skew things out. So you have to consider averaging your data. So you have to averaging it so that you buff out those outliers because the Gen AI won't necessarily have the ability to look for averages in that way. It might just count for everything. You might be skewed by customer interactions. This is something I see come up a lot when we look at people's social media because they go, oh, well, our social media on Facebook is just people aged 50 to 60. And you're like, okay. So the data they only have there is people who use that platform, which means it's going to be the way that they interact with your business through there. So again, you have to think about where is it? I mean, if you're forecasting using AI to forecast, but you've only updated web sale data, how is that going to be relevant for your retail stores? And you have to really consider the customer interaction type of the data you're uploading. And then finally, things being outdated and superseded. So products and services regularly get discontinued. If you don't tell the AI that, it's going to keep thinking it can suggest it or it can keep incorporating it into its results. So you have to keep things updated as well. And then because that the accuracy is important as well for what the use case is, because these are very hard things to sort of maintain. So you might want to ask yourself, is 85% accurate? Is that good for what this need is? Or do we need it to be as close to 100% as possible? So that's something you need to think about as well because the majority of the respondents confirmed that they lacked the optimum levels of quantity and quality in their data sources to achieve those precision results. And that's what will likely happen or already happened in your AI first AI project is you go, oh, this data is not matching what Jaden said on that Auscontact webinar. It's incorrect, it's irrelevant, the volumes are too high, it's been skewed by customer interactions, and now it's been outdated and superseded. So he must have a crystal ball he could see in the future. But that will happen the first time round. But don't be dissuaded because it's good. Because the more you know, right? And so then you just go back and you fix it. And we talk about that later around the framework for that. I can see some questions bumping through, Fran. Do you want me to stop for any of those?
We have, yeah. I'm just mindful of time, so we might quickly ask a couple of these.
Yeah.
I said before there's one there about common pitfalls, and I'll just let people know. Jaden, we're going to be able to send this presentation out for people.
Yeah, it's why I always
Yep.
put more text in slides than marketing like, because I
Yep.
know people want to read through this stuff afterwards and not
Yeah.
listen to my
So
voice
we'll
for
send
40
it
minutes.
round.
Yeah.
We'll send it round to everybody. But are there any call out common pitfalls that contact center teams should avoid during, or I guess really all of the points you've raised?
Yeah.
The contra of those are the things you need to be really mindful of when you're building your strategy. But what are the quick three things that people should avoid?
Yep. So the worst thing to do is to basically just tell the AI to go rampant on all of your data. So especially when we get knowledge-based connections, they just connect it to everything. Don't do it like that. Don't eat the elephant in one bite. Don't do it like that. Just basically say we're going to use this deployment for the team that looks after printers. And then just start something really, really small, because even something that's small, you're going to run into a problem. So instead of having something that's such a big problem and not knowing where the leak is, start something really small so you can go, that's where the leak is in the data source, right? So just for it's going to be annoying because you have to explain to the business, yes, we're spending $10,000. We only need to use it for this X%. But if you try to eat the elephant in one bite, you're not going to know where the problem was in the connected to the data sources, or you're not going to know where the problem is with the way that people are interacting with it. So just be patient and do a small scale, a sort of slice at the start before you go and unleash it.
Anything else?
Any other tips?
Any other common pitfalls? Yeah.
Yeah. So another common pitfall is that we go through this a bit later, but they basically go, you know what, we'll figure this out. So to Fran's point before, ask, better to learn from someone else's mistakes. And then also as well, if you don't want to hire someone internally to do it, find the right partner to do it for you and check their work history. Check that they've done this before. Check that they know, because then they've already learned the mistakes. So the money you pay them for subcontractor fees is going to be worth it, because you're basically buying all of their scars. They've already gone through the battle before. They know what went wrong. So you're paying for them to do it for you. And then finally, as well, is at the end of it. So you've done your small little sort of isolated POC. You've consulted with someone who's already been through this before. So then the final thing you need to do is that when you're getting the results, spend the time to go through and just manually check it as well. Okay. So the pitfall that people do is they get it out and they go, that looks pretty close to what it should be. Still go back and do a manual sort of check of it all as well. A lot of people don't want to do that, but that's the only way to be sure. So those tools, those 4 tools that we mentioned before, I go and check all of them manually. So I go and manually work out everything there. And that's why I'm confident in our tool, because I go and manually check everything. And you're probably thinking, who's got the time? Well, it's like, if you're going to spend $10,000, you're expecting $40,000. Sometimes you've got to roll up your sleeves and spend that time. I know that,
Got to be right.
yep,
Yeah.
that's the only way
Okay.
that you can know. Yeah, go ahead.
Regarding security, AI
Yes.
collects information, some of which may be sensitive, as you've touched on. Can it
Yes.
be removed slash deleted if needed, or is it there to stay once it's in there?
Depends on your tool. So I'll give you an example for the Dialpad tool. So we have a particular way that we do our data destruction, because we're ISO security rated standard. So the drives that it goes onto, they're actually sent through physical destruction over a set period. And then our tool allows you to mark the data for destruction or for archiving. So it really comes down to the tool that you're choosing. I know with Dialpad, we give you a lot of options for data retention to making sure it complies with what your needs are, but some tools it's not. And then even ourselves, for the data we collect for training, that has strict rules around it. That's why we have our ISO security standard and data privacy standards as well.
So probably another key thing for people to think about when they're building, doing that due diligence around procurement.
Absolutely. That's a really good question, by the way.
Yep. How do you see the role of AI evolving in contact centers over the next 5 to 10 years? Oh my God, 5 to 10 years. Goodness me. I reckon 2 to 3 years, it's going to be a new place, Sylvia. But Jaden, your quick takeaway on that one?
Voice bots. Unfortunately, voice bots. I've had an experience with voice bot when Google Maps called me up, and I was like, "Wow, that's the future." The future was that every business listed on Google Maps, and there's a lot, they all got called by that Google voice bot. And I tell you, it was not. It was definitely uncanny valley, but it just made so much sense to for a machine to call that many people and have a human conversation with someone. It was just absolutely surreal, and to me, that was the future.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there a way to temporarily disable the AI from processing / listening during a customer interaction, similar to how call recording can be paused.
Yeah,
As AI becomes more integrated into customer service, it's likely that some customers may request, customers who request that their call not be recorded will also have concerns about AI involvement in the conversation. Great question.
yeah, correct. And that's why I'm not sure if everyone remembers, but a couple of months ago, LinkedIn had to send all the Silicon Valley companies, well, most of them anyway, sent out an email saying, "Oh, we've changed our terms and conditions." And they were a
Yeah.
bit vague about what it was, but if you checked what it was essentially telling you that everything you were doing interacting with that software was being fed through their AI machine, and their AI
Yep.
machine was actually a sub processor and all this sort of legal sort of like mess and maze. So I know for Dialpads, it's pretty easy. You just press stop record and it will stop AI, and it's very clear about what it is. And there's just a simple click to say, I don't want my stuff going to your company for processing. So we make it easy. But where it becomes complicated is when you have sub processors. And when you don't own the AI platform that's doing the processing, it becomes very difficult. So we do have some slides on that, and that's something to watch out for. Is the vendor you're dealing with the owner of the AI, or are they sub-processing it through a third party? Therefore, they have no control. So that's
Mm,
something to consider as well.
definitely. Are we able to silo the AI program if we don't wish them to have pipelines out of the business due to the nature of the business and confidentiality? Confidentiality. I think you kind of touched on that before. Even conceptually starting in a small area, you can totally
That's right.
put guardrails around it, can't you? You can silo it.
Correct. And I would definitely advise that. The companies I've seen that have been successful with AI did that sort of, what is it, a hobby farm before they
Yeah.
started doing all the grain, right? Yes. Yes. Definitely do it that way.
Perfect. Okay, no open questions. I am mindful that we're over time, but let's go through them. If people can stick around, they can, but
Yep.
otherwise, they'll get the recording for this anyway,
Yes.
along with the slides.
Okay, no problems. Again, sorry for running over. It's just that I don't know. Whenever I talk to Fran, we end up because of her experience and because of
Did you
who
just
I know
blame
in the.
me for that?
No, I'm just saying that we talked for too long. We had a script and
We
everything. We
do.
knew it was going to
We
be the
do.
time, and then we always go off rails because, especially with the polls this time, the people we're talking to, the questions we're getting. I don't know. If you want to do a boring webinar, there's heaps of them out there. Maybe this isn't just as
No,
boring, but
it's
that's right.
it's such like it's there's so much that you can talk about as well, right? And there's
Yeah,
so many different applications and different elements of this that I think add value. So
yeah.
all good.
So here is what we were talking about before, and a lot of the questions that were just asked were around sort of, hey, can we do this with AI? Can we opt out? Is it secure? This slide is a good explanation of a difference between a company that has their own AI and is their proprietor of it, or when a company is doing it through third-party APIs or what we call sub-processing or white labeling. So one of the differences, so these differences here are really important and should help those people who asked those questions before understand why it is that a vendor might not be able to give you what you want or says that they can, but then you need to press them on it and say, well, how can you do that if you're white labeling? So for us, we have expert in-house AI team. So we design, develop, and manage it, which is why all the stuff I'm answering, I'm like really cool and casual about it because I know the team. They're in Canada. There's a person here in New Zealand as well. So there are people here. We've got 19 PhD data scientists that work for us. I talk to them every day. So for them, I know about our AI and I trust it. Here is being used on business contextual data. So let me give you my favorite example of what that means. So when you have your speech to text, when it's trained by something that is by the public, then you get some really strange hallucinations. And one of the strangest hallucinations that I see on a regular basis for software that uses ChatGPT or OpenAI as its way to do its speech to text and summaries is that when you do in Australia, the introduction on your webinar, and you acknowledge the traditional custodians, then what it will often do there is it will get some of those words mixed up. And the one I consistently see, which is something that our system doesn't do, is it says, we acknowledge the Elvis past and present. So the word Elvis is not something that our Dialpad system has because we're trained on business data, and Elvis very rarely comes up in a business context, believe it or not. Whereas because those sort of speech to text are being done through public trained, then asking the machine around something to do with Elvis Presley is a common thing, which is why statistically it will say, well, the word elders sounds like Elvis. I'm going to use that as the example, as the statistical probability of what that person said. Okay, so that's a good example of how business versus public trained data. So simple config, fast performance. Question was asked before, how long does it take to human override things? Do we have the ability to change sort of the custom dictionary of what things are? Can we do user feedback up or down on whether something was right? We have all of those options available. Is it cost effective? Do we have to pay every time there's an interaction, or is it an all you can eat? So ours is an all you can eat. And we even have it on our lowest tier license. It's not sort of as you go, because one of the things, just like call recording, once call recording wasn't linked to hard drives that you had to keep buying and backing up and sending to a special data holding company, once it basically became cloud sort of retention for your call recordings, well, everyone just recorded everything, right? And they just never really went through, they never deleted it, and they just had just mountains, just megabytes, gigabytes, terabytes of call recording that were just of no use to everyone. Well, believe it or not, same thing's happening with AI. There's a mountains and mountains of call summaries that no one ever reads. So that can have a cost associated with it, which there are some CRMs who love that. They love the fact that people have to keep generating activity because they can charge you once you go over a certain level,
Mm.
or once you have a certain number of API calls, even though half or 70% of that activity you don't care about. So for us, it's an all you can eat. So you don't have to worry about that. And for us, we continually update it and receive the user feedback as well. So I'll move on from that. But there are things to think about when you're interrogating your AI vendor that you're researching. So over here, this is essentially the people we spoke before about how to design sort of a business case, but what about the people who are going to be managing this? What do we do around the human side? So the research paper says that the cultural path to AI will require dedicated training, reskilling, and investment for employees. So the knowledge managers in your companies, the CAIOs, the librarians. So librarian is someone who's the custodian of the data, who basically goes in and checks and manages what the AI is sort of spitting out and receiving in. And then you've got chief knowledge officers is another role that's there. That's the people who become responsible for not only the enablement side, but the AI's enablement side as well, and keeping the AI up to date. We mentioned before around information becoming outdated and superseded. So a CKO is normally responsible for that. Having your company policies talk about AI. So, like I said, even the Silicon Valley companies had to go through and change all of their terms and conditions to incorporate AI and what your rights are around that, and whether you agree to that. So, company policies could be when it is okay to use AI, or if AI is being used, make sure you tell the customer. If AI is being used, every now and then go and manually check the results yourself to check that it is being accurate. One of the things here that I think everyone should keep in mind is publicly reporting incidents. So let's say you had a vendor, an AI vendor in one of your projects, something went terribly wrong with a bug in their code. You should tell people about that. You should report it, because that's the only reason we know about sort of security breaches, because there's all these regulations around security breaches, and people should know if a vendor has a security breach, the same way that they should say if a vendor, their AI was inaccurate regularly and was spreading misinformation. So I think we should be publicly reporting it, not trying to sweep it under the rug and go, oh, that was a dumpster fire, right? I don't think we should do it that way. I think we should call out vendors who get it wrong. And then challenging those AI vendors, which from the questions we've had here, it sounds like we've got a good mix of people that would do that, that would push back on the vendor and say, well, what's your data security? Well, what's our ability to override with human intervention? Right.
I was just going
Oh,
to say, I think it's so important, and I know we've had lots of fantastic questions. Obviously, people are thinking about this, but this and the report, like Jaden said, we'll give you a link to the report. You can go and have a look at that. This all gives you insights that you need to own to then challenge. So I think
yes.
that last point is so important: challenging the vendors in the space and actually being really prepared to push. This needs to be organizational led. as opposed to vendor led, your solution. Your solution needs to be for you. And the very best thing you can do is arm yourself with all of those different components that help you challenge and push and question and end up ultimately with the best solution for you and for your customers. So, everything that Jaden has gone through today actually gives you another area to think, actually, am I asking enough about that? Do I know enough? Do I need to push and explore further? But all of them have that contra component that can actually form part of what you are pushing for from vendors.
Exactly. And so let's get to the bottom line. The paper says that AI is a disruptive, transformative force for businesses, and that AI will augment and amplify human capabilities. So when I normally talk about this, I do always talk about the combine harvester. And the reason I talk about the combine harvester is because that was basically the start of like a revolution for farming, because you could all of a sudden break what they call the Methuselah trap, which is that if you needed to grow more food, you have to hire more farmers and harvesters to be able to harvest that food, which meant you had to feed those people. So once you had a tractor, which you didn't need to feed, and it was harvesting the food, you could start to feed a lot of people, and it freed up those farmers to go and pursue other jobs instead of doing backbreaking under the sun labor of harvesting grain. So the tractor was a really good thing for society, and meant that we can all sit here in front of a camera and do our emails. No, I'm just joking. So let's have a look here at these 7 points. Achieve data mastery. What does that mean? That means that your data sources are not set and forget. Okay. You must design and adhere to a complete framework for your AI's data sources. Who is responsible for overseeing its operation? When are the data sources quality reviewed and updated? Why is the data sources being used, and why are they relevant to the AI response decision matrix? What is the ability for a human to intervene and respond to a decision? And how is the data hosted to ensure stability of the connection and the security as well? So something that any type of machinery within your company, what happens when you lose connection to it? Do you have a backup? Will everything just stop working if the lights turn out? Or is there something there as well? A lot of people forget about that, because once you start relying on something like AI, if you lose access to it, does everything break down as a result of that? Number two, choose a strong business use case. So the first project is almost certain to become a Pandora's box, because you'll have source data quality and quantity issues. The staff or your customers may not adopt it at the rate or with the positivity that you would hope that you might have. Maybe you start connecting data and you start getting outputs from AI analyzing for analytical purposes or customer insights, and you might just get unexpected results that are negative. A lot of people do this when they do AI to sort of map through their security or their user habits, and all of a sudden they realize that everyone doesn't have antivirus on, or that most people around Christmas time just start logging off and stop doing work. So be ready to perhaps get some negative news that you didn't know was there. And then also your deployment timelines and costs will not be what you're quoted originally. It just won't. You will always take a little bit longer. You'll always have to pay a little bit of extra money here and there, because you might have to engage some contractor services, or you might have to do some upgrades through your company as a result of this AI project as well. Number three, understand how to partner for data sources and signals. So, I mean, does your business prepare its own tax returns, or do you outsource that to a specialist? So just consider outsourcing to experts, whether that's helping you clean up the data, to source the data when you find those negative results there, getting advice on that. So talking to people, let's say you're in your Auscontact group here, talking to a friend, talking to someone like Dialpad or a partner. Monetize the outcomes and generate derivatives. So we went through that detail before around those 5 points of where you could potentially have a cost or benefit reduction, and sorry, a cost or a time reduction. So make sure you put that all in your business case, because every strategic project initiative should have that business case, and then calculate what the research paper calls a return on transformation benefit, an RTB. Right? And then, as we said, consider just starting it small. Don't try to bite the whole elephant at once, because you will choke and potentially break your jaw as well. Engage your stakeholders. So from your business case goals and benefits, make sure that you can actually extract the reports or the measures from the tools. So you could deploy it all, but if there's actually no way for you to report it, then your first project's not going to go too well because you're going to be like, is it working? And you go, I don't know, I think it's working. So make sure you ask the vendors whether you can actually extract what you need to be able to engage your stakeholders with an update on the results. Now, Nourish networks, I don't like the way that they've written this because this is actually a really important one. Nourish networks, to expand on it, means you've got to upskill and employ AI-enabled sort of workers. And what these people do is they'll nourish the networks. So you're not basically putting all your eggs into just a partner basket, or not just putting all your eggs into a small little tiger team, as we were mentioning before. You let everyone know through your training, through your upskilling, through your communication that you're using AI. They should become familiar with it so that they can give advice. They can check and manually check the results. So make sure it's not just a little pointed project that only these experts know about. Nourish the network. Make sure everyone is aware of it, familiar with it, so they can all contribute to keeping it honest and keeping it alive as well. And trust but verify. Again, my favorite one, I've harped on about it, but never stop interrogating and reviewing both the AI tool data sources and also the vendors as well. Okay. So just because you bought it once in 6 months, say, hey, did you update your model to match with the government regulation or this security thing here? Or did you patch that? Like, what's going on? You haven't done anything new to the model. I can see that there's a cheaper way to do this. What are you doing? Have a two-way conversation with your vendor. Okay. Don't set and forget it. And I have some stuff here more around Dialpad, but just to let you know, it's more accurate. And that's how many minutes we've trained ours on with the business conversation sets. So 6 billion minutes of business conversations across video, chat, and voice. And then because of that business context, that's why accuracy is for those four tools like CSAT, QA scorecards, summaries, action items, and also playbooks. That's why we have such high accuracy in the output results. It's because it's trained on business conversations. And then over here as well, even on our sort of entry grade license, you get those summaries as well, so which is a GPT style sort of summary that you can do in short, medium, or long, and then the action items there as well. Very, very useful for an important call that happened maybe 6 months ago. No one took any notes, so then you can basically jump back in and then get that summary there straight away, all your calls if you have it turned on. And if you sort of think, yep, who's Dialpad? What's this guy talking about? Seems like he knows about it, but have they actually done it anywhere? Yes, we have. So you can always talk to us. We have some customers that are using our products. To be honest, we use the sort of AI internally, but our customers use it better than us, simply because they're just Australian companies, right? And Australian companies have to always do more with less. So AI is a big deal for them because they're just constantly feeling like they're understaffed and that they need something to help them. So our Australian customers that use our AI, they really try to push it to the nth degree. In fact, a lot of our larger ones, we're only one AI tool out of many that they're using internally. And finally, here we'd have the live Q&A, but we've already sort of gone through as we've gone through. So Fran, what would you like to do from here? On mute, on mute. Oh, yes, I get to say someone's on mute. I haven't done that for
Oh
a
my
month.
God, I'm never still on mute.
I gotta say,
So
that's surprising coming from you. Yes.
it is. I'm a shocker. Sorry, everybody. I think we're going to have to wrap it up. We are
Yep.
already nearly 30 minutes over, and thank you, everybody that stuck around. I think we can safely say there is so much we can talk about with this stuff. But Jaden, thank you for today. I think that was really, really great to set that, to really give the audience some elements for them to really think about when they're setting the scene for their business cases, really understand where they can channel in and go a bit deeper on components that can actually drive that conversation with the vendor, but equally build their business cases. So some really fantastic information, some great questions from the audience. So well done, guys.
Absolutely. Really good questions.
And yeah, again, we don't usually go over quite by that much, but as Jaden said, we tend to continue to go down rabbit holes when we chat because there's so much that I'm curious about. So,
Yes.
lots of thank yous from everybody. So, thanks, guys. We'll see you all at the next session. We
I will
will
choose a
send
winner and
out.
we'll email them, by the way. I haven't
Correct.
forgotten about
Yeah.
that. We will
Yep.
do that. So
We will
yes.
do that. So we'll send out an email with the recording link for you, as well as the slides. And as Jaden said, he will happily choose the winner of that Fabo $200 gift card, which is quite nice right before Chrissy. So
Yes.
thanks everyone for coming, and
Thank you, everyone.
we'll see you all again next time. Jaden, as always, thanks for a great session.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for staying on, those who did, and for those who couldn't. Like I said, if you listen to the recording, I say thank you to you as well.
Thanks, guys. Bye.